You've heard me say it before, but it bears repeating. Sugar is one of the worst things for your health. Yet it's hiding in almost all of the foods we regularly consume. In fact, the average American eats about 153 pounds of sugar every year, whether they know it or not. For reference, that's about the size of a baby giraffe. That's a lot of sugar. Sadly, our health is paying the price. But the good news is there is something you can do about it. In just a moment, I'm going to share some of my best tips for kicking a sugar addiction, no matter how severe. I'll also expose the other health enemy when it comes to sweeteners and what to use instead. Now, as anyone knows, I'm a recovered sugarholic. Maybe you never recover, but the effect of sugar as an addictive substance is incredibly well known and well studied. We know that studies on rats will choose sugar over both heroin and cocaine if they get the opportunity to press a lever. And they will always go for the sugar hit instead of heroin and cocaine. And think about that for a little while. Okay, so getting off of sugar is pretty doggone hard. One of the reasons it's so hard is because our tongue is 2/3 of the surface is sugar receptors. They're actually sweet receptors, not sugar receptors. So they're looking for sweetness. Why? Because quite frankly, we evolved from great apes. Great apes only gained weight during fruit season, and fruit season only occurred once a year, usually in the late summer and early fall. And even in the jungle, fruit does not ripen year-round. There are always dry seasons or rainy seasons or cold seasons when fruit isn't produced. So great apes only gain weight during fruit season. So it would be advantageous for us to have sweet receptors on our tongue to make us literally want to eat sweet things that had sugar content. And that sugar content, by the way, was fructose. And we recently had a podcast guest who wears a continuous glucose monitor and has recently been shocked with how healthy fruit spikes his blood sugar. And I see this all the time in my patients. I see it all the time in their blood work and triglycerides. And fruit is just another form of sugar that will spike your blood sugar, I guarantee it. Okay, so we got to get rid of sugar, but sugar is hiding everywhere. So you got to look at labels, and there are lots of sugar disguises. Things like brown rice syrup, glucose, fructose, agave. These are all other words for sugar. Now, there's an even more important trick for decoding food labels. As you remember, the food labels were manipulated to hide the sugar content. And this was done at the behest of big agriculture. So most people, including most of my patients, look at the back of a package and they look at grams of sugar. And quite frankly, they're often quite low on a lot of the products that I tell people are safe. But you have to actually look at, first of all, serving size. Secondly, you have to look at total carbohydrates. Total carbohydrates tells you how much sugar is in that portion. Now, you take away the fiber, which is the next line right below that. And so you take total carbohydrates minus the fiber, and that will actually tell you how many grams of sugar are in that serving size. Now, for fun, there's 4 grams of carbohydrate in a teaspoon of sugar. So take whatever number you arrive at, total carbohydrates minus fiber, and then divide it by 4. And that'll tell you how many teaspoons of sugar is in that product. And when you do that, you will be shocked with where the sugar is coming from. And when I sit down with my patients and we go through their meals and what they're eating, we always find the source of the sugars they're eating. And many of them are apoplectic because it doesn't taste sweet, and they were looking at that sugar on the label, not total carbohydrates. And once we show them that, and once they change and get that out of their diet, not only does their triglycerides plummet, their insulin levels plummet, their pre-diabetes or diabetes goes away, and bonus, their cholesterol numbers plummet. And the good cholesterol goes up. It's win-win-win. Are there sweet alternatives that aren't going to kill you? Well, let's get to the good stuff. There are actually several quite safe sweeteners, and there's a really good one now that's gone to the top of my list. 2 of the safest are allulose and monk fruit. Now, both of them offer you that sweet taste without spiking your blood sugar. And they do so while also feeding your gut buddies with prebiotics. In fact, allulose has now been granted a prebiotic fiber designation by the FDA. For those of you who don't know allulose, I've touted it in The Energy Paradox, and it figures prominently in Unlocking the Keto Code, my next book. Allulose is a rare sugar. It was first discovered in figs, but it's a very rare sugar. So it is a, quote, natural sugar, but it has no caloric value, but it's really sweet. The nice thing about allulose is it has fiber, and I've found, and I think Kate has found as well, that allulose works really well in baking recipes and also in ice cream recipes. It's really now my go-to sweetener. But please, look for non-GMO allulose. There's a lot of allulose being produced. Most allulose is produced from corn. It does not have any corn lectins or corn proteins, folks. But look for non-GMO. It's available, and I think you're going to like it. Now, when it comes to monk fruit, the Lakanto brand is really good, and I like that a lot. There are several now chocolates that are sweetened with monk fruit. There are a couple chocolate bars coming out with allulose. They're a little expensive right now, but stay tuned. Another great option is inulin. Now, inulin is the sugar in chicory that's also probably the best prebiotic there is. Just like sugar is a great product, but wherever you see inulin, that's also a good alternative. And you can buy inulin in bulk. It does have a sweet flavor. It's not an overwhelming sweet flavor, so you got to use a lot of inulin if you're using it purely as a sweetener. But it gives you a great prebiotic fiber at the same time. Now, stevia is a natural non-caloric sweetener. It unfortunately has some bitterness that has to be hidden. My favorite stevia is sweet leaf, which is blended with inulin. But there are a couple papers that suggest even stevia raises insulin levels, and I can assure you, you don't want to raise your inulin levels. But please, 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 particularly if you're into the keto movement, beware of all these keto bars because so many of them are sweetened with sucralose. And it's often hidden in the list of ingredients. And if you see the word sucralose, that's Splenda, folks, and that's the Duke University study that it's a great way to kill off your microbiome. Okay, what about the sugar alcohols, like erythritol or xylitol? Now, the problem with sugar alcohols is that they, for many people, can cause digestive upset, either in the form of gas and bloating or in the form of diarrhea. It's very individual, so I don't have a big problem with these as long as you're tolerant to them. Xylitol originally came from the birch tree. There's now lots of other forms of xylitol. Xylitol is interesting because it is an antibacterial for the mouth. So antibacterial may not be as good as it sounds. So again, you just have to be careful with all of these. Now, I'm not a big fan of yacon syrup because, quite frankly, a number of my patients who are using a lot of yacon syrup see their triglycerides kick up. Even I've seen a couple become pre-diabetic. Now, it may not have lectins in it, and it may be a form of inulin, but it just doesn't mean you should go crazy with these. You can find these syrups at Walmart. You can find Sun Food Sweet yacon syrup on Amazon. But I think now there's just far better options for you. Thanks for watching, but don't go anywhere. The next episode of the Dr. Gundry Podcast is waiting for you now. Some of the best sources of fiber and expose the ones that sound healthy but can actually leave you bloated, tired, and frustrated.